All right. So big ideas from what we did yesterday. One sample t-test for mu diff, or also called a paired t-test for mu diff. We use all the same things that we do on a one sample t-test for mu. So we use that formula for t. We use that form for doing our definition of the parameter. The only thing different between a one sample t-test for mu and a paired t-test for mu diff when I'm defining my parameter is that I have to include the direction there. So we have to say which things are being subtracted. All the subtraction happens before you do the averages. So you subtract all the pieces and then you only use the differences. If you have to make a dot plot to check for normality, you only want a dot plot of the differences. So after you've done subtraction, so you'll only have one graph. You would have one graph. You check one thing for independence, your 10% condition. You only need to check one thing for your randomness. If it's a multiple choice question, you can use the t-test on the calculator. You can also use t-interval on a calculator. Or if this was a proportion, you could do a z-test or a z-interval. Paired t, we have one sample. The data are paired together for each individual participant in that study. So you have two pieces of information about one person. And that happens for every single person that's involved. So mean of differences, that's mu diff. You subtract and then you average. A two sample t, we have two independent samples, two separate groups, and we've gathered one piece of information about everybody in those two separate groups. So for this one, that's a mu1 minus mu2. We average things, and then we take just those two numbers and subtract. So that's kind of our big difference between those two. I want you guys to look at the three scenarios that are being described in the Check Your Understanding. I want you to decide whether you're going to use a two sample t procedure or whether you're going to do paired t procedure. So is this mu1 minus mu2, or is this a mu diff situation? And I want you to be able to explain why you have made that choice. Let's take about, 5-6 minutes. Let's do 6 minutes. You have 2 minutes for each question on there, and then we will go through those. All right. Number one, would this be a mu diff, a paired? Or would this be mu1 minus mu2, a two sample? Yes, this is a mu diff. This is paired t procedures. There's one sample of 30 adults, and each of those adults has two measurements: number of junk males, number of junk emails. And those are paired for each of the individuals. What about number two, mu1 minus mu2 or mu diff? Mu1 minus mu2, yes. We have two independent samples here, people on the East Coast, people on the West Coast. One piece of information is gathered from each of the individuals that's participating, but we have two separate distinct groups. And then what about the last one, number three? This is a mu diff. There's one sample of 15 cell phones, and the two measurements are paired for each of the cell phones. They measured the signal strength in two different areas, one in Pennsylvania, one in Virginia, on the same phone. And then they did that for each of those 15 phones. And they compared the data for a single phone together before they pooled that information. Awesome. So they have 15 cell phones. They go to Virginia and they test the signal strength there on each of the 15 phones, and then they take the same 15 phones to Pennsylvania and they check the signal strength there. So one sample, 15 randomly selected cell phones, two measurements that get paired for each of those 15 phones. You guys have the remaining half an hour to work on either homework number 2, which is due on Monday, or to work on the test review that you should have picked up on your way in the door today. If you have any questions about either of those 2 items or anything that is in your notes packet, I am more than happy to answer any questions you guys have.